your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome, everybody. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. And Happy New Year to those of you celebrating Rosh Hashanah, which began last night and continues on the day. And on Wall Street, again, more volatility. I guess it all depends on where the morning wind blows over from the Eurozone. The Dow was up 220 points. Gold getting back some of yesterday's losses, but not nearly all. Gold up about $7 on the ETF. Silver about 60 cents. Gold stocks also headed higher. Oil, again, on the upswing, back up over $2 a barrel, back above 83. All these commodities are acting, with big fluctuations. The catalyst this morning first was news out of Europe that the Germans decided to vote more money to bail out other European countries. That helped lift the mood over there, as well as the euro, even though in actuality no more bailouts is actually better for the euro, although right now the euro kind of just trades on short-term fear. And so any news that acts like, well, there's more bailouts actually helps the euro because it lessens that fear. I think if we actually had some defaults and got it over with, that would be a very positive environment in which the euro could in fact rally. But other news that came out this morning that I think set a positive tone. Before the market opened, we got the jobless claims, the most recent claims, and they took a big drop. They dropped for the week ending September 24th all the way down to 391,000. Now, it's not like that's a low number, but it's the lowest number we've had, I think, since April. It dropped down from 420,000 claims, or for 420,000 what was forecast. So the previous week was higher than that. But I think more likely than that, this is a statistical outlier. I don't think this is a real indication that we've turned a corner in job creation. So I would expect the job claim numbers to drift back up in the weeks ahead and get back above that 400,000, 410, 420,000 range, which is pretty much where the jobless claims have been hanging out for most of the last several years. In fact, Ben Bernanke, given a speech yesterday, talked about unemployment as a national crisis, which I think, again, is the Fed chairman kind of teeing up the ball for the official launch of QE3. In fact, in the Q&A period of this hearing, I got a quote from Ben Bernanke where he basically, opens up the door to QE3. And I think more than just open. I think it's not just that he opens it slightly. I think he throws it open. I'm trying to find where I have that quote. But anyway, what he said, is that I can't see the exact quote. It's in this article somewhere. But what he said was that he was willing to do something extraordinary if inflation expectations came down or he saw the threat of deflation rearing its head again. Of course, deflation is not a threat. We actually need that. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen. We have inflation. But I'm sure Ben Bernanke will be able to find a way to put some spin on the numbers to say that, oh, no, there's not enough inflation now. Inflation expectations are too low. There is the threat of deflation, and he will announce something extraordinary to tackle the national crisis that he says is the high unemployment rate, which is only going to get higher because the current administration and Congress are doing nothing to address the real underlying economic problems that lay at the heart of our economic and employment problems. And in fact, more jobs are going to be lost right up until the election, and most likely following the election. I saw this morning on CNBC, presidential candidate Rick Perry was on. I thought he did a very good job of expressing himself. I think he did a much better job than he did in that Florida debate that was responsible for a big drop in the polls for Rick Perry. The only answer I didn't really like that Rick Perry made. Of course, maybe it's good politics. I don't know, because he again backed away from the Social Security comments by trying to reassure everybody who's currently on Social Security and everybody who's close to retirement age that they have nothing to worry about. that no one's going to take their money away, that anybody who says so, it's just scare tactics, they have nothing to worry about. How can he say that? If he understands it's a Ponzi scheme, they've got a lot to worry about. Because then what Rick Perry said is that it's a lie if we tell our young people that Social Security is going to be there for them, so we have to give them a private alternative. But how can we give them a private alternative without reducing the benefits for the people who are currently collecting them? Because the benefits are coming from those taxes that the young people are paying. And if we're going to let the young people off the hook, then how are we going to continue to supply money to the older generation? It is impossible. Now, is he want to have a massive tax hike in other taxes to make up for the lost revenue in payroll taxes, or does he want to slash other parts of the government? Is he going to identify that, or is he just for huge budget deficits? Does he want to finance Social Security with massive budget deficits, which means massive inflation? Which means either way, either the people who are collecting Social Security are going to have their benefits reduced, or they're going to have them wiped out due to inflation. But either way, Rick Perry is wrong when he says they have nothing to worry about. So that's the politician coming out. I think if Rick Perry just leveled with the public, just tried it. I mean, why can't anybody be honest about Social Security? Just give it a try. Give honesty a shot. You never know. It might actually work. Because I think the elderly now understand how much they're losing to inflation, how much 0% interest rates are destroying their retirements. So I think a frank discussion of this problem, and which is what he could have, and I think he would diffuse a lot of his critics if he were to really lead on this issue. And I know who knows. I think it's actually a winning issue, but everybody is afraid to bring it up because they're so afraid of the backlash from the Social Security recipients in the AARP. But again, the irony of it is the segment of our economy that has the most to lose from failure to deal with Social Security are the people who are collecting it, because they're the ones that are going to get wiped out the most by inflation. They're going to suffer when the dollar collapses more than any other demographic group. And if we do end up having hyperinflation, probably the main reason will be because we refuse to make cuts to Social Security. So somebody's got to be level, got to level with the elderly on this subject. Otherwise, they're the ones that are going to suffer the most. Speaking about these polls, the most recent polls really show big surge for Herman Cain. This most recent poll I'm looking at from Wednesday has Herman Cain more than tripling in a month. Cain is in third place at 17%, just 2 percentage points behind Rick Perry, who's at 19%, and Romney is leading with 23%. But there's only, 6 percentage points between Mitt Romney, the leader, and Herman Cain in third place. So, hey, it's not a two-man race by any stretch of the imagination. Unfortunately, Ron Paul dropped back to fifth place behind Newt Gingrich, who's now in 11th place, and Ron Paul was in sixth place in that most recent poll. But I think the most interesting thing about the poll, and I'm going to discuss this when I get back from this break, is how well Herman Cain does against Barack Obama, or more importantly, what a good job Herman Cain does, better than anybody, of eating in to the Obama support. We'll talk about that and take some calls. 855-4SHIFT. The lines are open right now if you want to call in. 855-4SHIFT. We will be right. And this is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. If you want to call, we still got an open board. We got a guest coming up at the top of the next segment, but strange absence of calls these last couple days. Hopefully we still have an audience. If anybody is out there, give us a call, 855-4SHIFT, if you want to join the program. But before the break, I was talking about the most recent polls, and here's what's so interesting about the poll. If you look at President Obama versus all of the other Republican candidates, he pretty much gets anywhere from 43% of the vote when he's up against John Huntsman to as high as 48% of the vote against Michelle Bachmann and Newt Gingrich. But Rick Santorum, he gets 45% of the vote, Romney 44%, Rick Perry 44%, Ron Paul 44%. Pretty consistent. Now, as far as how many votes the Republicans get, the one Republican that does the best is Romney at 41%. I think it's because he's got the highest name recognition, because after all, he ran for president last time around. He probably has the highest name recognition, and that's why people are selecting Romney versus none of the above, or I'd like another choice. But the interesting thing is, look at how President Obama does against Herman Cain. Even though Herman Cain only has 34% of the vote, the same as Paul, virtually the same as Huntsman and Palin, even though he's at 34%, Obama drops all the way down to 39%. There isn't even there's no other candidate in the race that where Obama does anywhere near as poorly as he does against Herman Cain. Now, what is the explanation for this? To me, it's pretty clear. There are people who support President Obama, yet the only other candidate they can vote for on the Republican side is Herman Cain. That when you put Herman Cain in the mix, he actually diminishes President Obama's support. No other candidate does that. So there are people that will vote for Obama over anyone else in the Republican field. But if you give them the choice of Herman Cain, all of a sudden they go for Cain. They don't want to. Now, what is that? Now, why is it? Is it a racial thing? Are there some black Republicans that just want to vote for a black man, and when they have the choice between Cain and Obama, then they take Cain? But if it's Obama versus any of the other white Republicans, they take Obama. Maybe it has to do with the fact that there are a lot of Republicans that think that Herman Cain is more electable. Maybe that's why they like him. Maybe they think that the best way to beat Obama is to cut into his black support. And maybe people think that his race will be a factor, which is also a bit of a racial element. But whatever it is, or even if it has nothing to do with race, even if it's another factor that I don't know about, maybe he's just touching a nerve, maybe he's just that good a speaker as far as some people are concerned, maybe that his name recognition is relatively low, but that the people who know him have a higher propensity to support him over Obama, even though those same people will support Obama versus any other Republican nominee. But I think what the message is that is very clear is that if the Republicans want to beat President Obama, and you would think that mainstream Republicans would be looking at these polls, that if they want to beat Obama, if that's their goal, then Cain seems to be, based on these polls, the most likely candidate to actually beat him. Now, in the current poll, he's in second place against Obama, right? Mitt Romney is higher because Romney's got 41%, whereas Cain's only got 34%. But a lot of that difference could simply be in name recognition, that not enough people know who Herman Cain is. Because against Romney, President Obama's got 44% of the vote. But against Herman Cain, he goes all the way down to 39% of the vote. Now, it's the same people, so Obama's name recognition isn't a question here. He's got the same name. Of course, it's Hunter. He's the president. Everybody knows who he is. So he drops 5 points. Obama drops 5 points when he's up against Cain versus where he was. 5 points. That's a lot. I mean, that's a big number in a presidential race. So, I mean, he ought to be able to make, I still prefer Ron Paul as my favorite candidate. But, if it's going to be, whether we should look at the businessmen, who are the businessmen in this race, right? The people that are totally outside of politics. It's Mitt Romney and Herman Cain. And I think Herman Cain is more electable than Mitt Romney, and I think he's more of a conservative. So I don't know, this race is not over. I don't think Ron Paul's out, but I don't think Herman Cain is out. Remember when the Republican nominations started out in 2008, it started out as Giuliani was the front runner, and what was the other guy, the actor? I'm blanking on his name. But the two front runners in 2008 kind of went by the wayside. Anyway, all of a sudden we got a lot of calls now. People woke up when I asked them to call, so we'll figure out, we'll grab some calls real quick. First up is Ed calling from Colorado. Ed, welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter, how you doing?
Good.
Long-time listener or client? I actually live in Florida, and I've called a few times before, but it kind of surprised me that you'd be being such a Paul supporter, which I am too. This guy's a Federal Reserve. Just because he worked at the Federal Reserve
doesn't mean he's part of some grand conspiracy to destroy the country. I mean, I mean, the fact that he obviously is a bright guy, too. I mean, not only did he run a business, but he's been involved in banking. I mean, most of the other candidates, other than Ron Paul, probably have no idea, how the banking system works.
Yeah, but he was against auditing the Fed. He was for the bailouts. He looks like another.
I don't know. I mean, look at his position pages on his 999 plan. He says on his own website is a prelude to the fair tax, where he completely abolished the income tax. In his corporate tax, he wants to exempt any dividends that are paid, so he ends double taxation. He's putting all government spending programs, including entitlements, on the table for cuts. So he wants to slash government spending. He wants to repeal the tax code. I mean, he wants to do a lot of positive things. I think he's an electable guy. I mean, that's the point. I think he's a charismatic guy who can actually get elected and who is talking about smaller government. Is he a perfect candidate? No, but he's a lot better than the guy we nominated last time, John McCain. He'd be a much better candidate. Would he be a better president than Ron Paul? No. But I'm just talking about the general perception. The guy went up to 17% in the most recent poll. How did he do that? Ron Paul is nowhere near. Obviously, he's resonating somehow. I mean, if you could put Ron Paul's brain into Herman Cain's body for his presence to give a speech, he might. The other candidates would have to just concede. It would already be over.
Yeah, well, they'll never get rid of the VAT. They'll have a VAT tax and an income tax. That's what everybody's afraid of. And why was he against auditing the Fed?
Look, I mean, I was in favor of auditing the Fed, but maybe he wants to keep the Fed independent. The problem is they're not independent. They're doing the bidding of Congress. In fact, Rick Perry, that was one of the good points he made on CNBC today, to say that they're just enabling bad fiscal policy. They're not acting independent. But I've had him on the show twice. I'm going to try to get him on the show again because he's a very interesting guy. And he does have a chance to get that Republican nomination. And if he gets it, hey, we got to support him because he's going to be our only shot. And maybe he'll actually listen to Ron Paul too. I mean, I think hey, if he goes on the Peter Schiff show, he's got an open mind. Anyway, hey, stick around. We got plenty of people on hold, but we got a guest coming up. Should be an interesting discussion. So stick around. This is Peter Schiff on Schiff Radio. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com, and joining the conversation now is Catherine Hacken-Packett. Catherine is a sociologist and a research professor at the London School of Economics, and she has been developing a preference theory, and she is a big critic of feminist assumptions about women and the workplace. And she, I guess, has defined a term, erotic capital. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine, and how are you?
I'm well. I've always found, and I'm not really sure what, you can give me a definition of erotic capital, but I always think that an English accent is probably part of it.
Well, it's nice to hear that. But what my book is about is how the way that physical and social attractiveness affect all of our social relationships, and I'm arguing that if you understand erotic capital and the power that it gives you in social relationships, then you will be more successful not only in the workplace but also in friendships and in the politics of private life.
So you're looking at erotic capital then as an asset, along the lines of maybe a college degree or a business experience, or has it got a broader meaning? It
is a personal asset, and that's the key argument of the book, that erotic capital is a key personal asset in the same way as having qualifications or good social contacts or even plenty of money. In fact, one of the studies, which is an American study recently carried out, shows that the value of attractiveness is equal to the value of qualifications in terms of its impact on success in adult life.
Well, does that depend on the business? Clearly, the way you look is going to be a very important factor in certain professions, maybe television journalism. Obviously, you look at Fox News, you look at all the women that are that are on that network, they're all very attractive, and that's because it's a visual industry. I mean, their faces on the camera, their bodies are on camera, and so the producers want to put attractive women in those roles. But do you think it's the same way, even where roles where obviously physical appeal is not as important?
Well, you're absolutely right. That effect is an average across the whole of the workforce. But what it means is that, as you say, in particular occupations where visual appearance is even more important, the markup is even greater for being attractive. And in some others, like manual jobs, it's probably going to be very low indeed. But the key thing that's very interesting is that the markup for being attractive, physically and socially attractive, because I would point out that TV presenters have to have social skills and charm and charisma as well as being visually attractive, is that the key thing is that this is a new phenomenon. It is not something that existed, say, 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. It's becoming
Are you sure? I mean...
Now. Yes, the studies show that it had very little, much lower impact on earnings and success in life 30, 40, 50 years ago. And
Are you talking about for women or for both men and women?
It's for both men and women. And in fact, one of the things that I'm showing in the book is that the benefits seem to be higher than for men than for women. Men are earning, on average, something like plus 17% more if they're attractive versus unattractive, whereas the markup for women is only plus 12%. So there's a sex difference there, and women have a lot of catching up to do.
Well, do you take into consideration, though, obviously 30 or 40 years ago, at least in America, there were far fewer women in the workplace, and those that were in the workplace dropped out when they got married and had kids?
Yes, that's taken into account, but the key thing that makes things different today is that, first of all, a lot of our culture is more visual. In the past, people who, for example, were journalists, they were just a name somewhere, and nobody had any idea what they looked like. But now journalists have a little thumbprint photo alongside their name. Now, because of the internet and digital photography, we see photos of people far more than we ever did in the past.
I mean, that's true. Every realtor has a picture of themselves on their business card. So, I mean,
exactly, and Facebook means that even people who haven't even entered the workforce already become have a visual presence in a way they didn't have before. So looks and appearance are counting more because we're more visible and more exposed than we were before.
Well,
but the other reason is simply that we're getting much richer, and as societies get more affluent, they can afford luxuries more, and beauty and elegance and charm and grace and so on are luxuries that we want to afford.
Well, I guess you can throw plastic surgery in there, because clearly that there's a lot more procedures out there, and because the government is not involved in plastic surgery, the cost of the procedures is not skyrocketing. So a lot more women are taking advantage of that, and so they're able to continue to have these characteristics, into their 40s, 50s, and maybe even higher.
Well, the interesting thing is that the increase in plastic surgery amongst men, professional and managerial men, is actually faster than amongst women, particularly in times of recession when the competition for jobs gets tighter.
Yeah, do you think this is across the board, even in a job where nobody even sees you? If you're a computer programmer, or you're working behind a desk without a lot of interaction with the public, do you still see the disparity in incomes?
Well, it partly is. I mean, it is certainly more in jobs facing customers and clients and so on. But at the same time, it applies even for people who have backroom jobs, if you like, because being attractive affects all of our relationships, and that includes relationships with colleagues, with superiors, with subordinates, with all the people that you interact with. So it probably doesn't affect manual jobs so much because there's less social interaction.
Is there any point where it kind of works against you? Can you get to the point where you become so attractive that then it's a detriment, or is it just a positive curve? The more attractive you are, the more successful you are?
It seems to be, as far as I can tell, that the more attractive you are, the better it is. But obviously there's declining returns as you move higher and higher.
Well, some women might claim that sometimes being too attractive in business, people take them less seriously. People are tending to, their minds will start to wander. They won't necessarily be listening to what they're saying, but they're just going to be absorbing what they're seeing, and their minds will be wandering to, towards other subjects.
That's true, and people like George Clooney have also argued that they are not taken as seriously as they should do. For example, he's a film producer and as well as an actor, and he has argued that he's not always been taken seriously because people have dismissed him as just a pretty face. So yes, that kind of problem can arise.
I wonder if there's also any kind of, reluctance among some employers. They might be nervous about hiring a very attractive woman. They might feel that it might be more inclined to invite a sexual harassment lawsuit if some of the male employees are a little bit too, enthusiastic in the way they treat her. So it could be a difficult workplace environment if you take a really attractive woman and put them in an environment where, especially if there's a lot of young men around.
Well, there are obviously pros and cons in all sorts of contexts and all sorts of jobs, but there's plenty of evidence also that people see hiring attractive people as beneficial for their businesses because businesses that employ more attractive people, men and women, are more profitable, and even activities such as academic work or lawyers, where you would in principle think that it had nothing to do with what your looks are like. It's been shown that people who are more attractive, students will rate a professor's course as being a much better course if the professor is an attractive person.
That's probably just a natural human reaction, but I also think that a lot of the characteristics of being physically attractive, because you can get more attractive, you can work out, right? You can stay in shape, you can eat the right foods, you can take care of your skin. So in many cases, the people who are trying their best to take care of their appearances might just be more ambitious, energetic, harder working people. So some of the same characteristics that keep them in good shape and attractive are the same characteristics that are also driving their success.
That's a very good point, but this is why I refer to some of the American studies, some of them only carried out in the last 3-4 years, which I describe in the book. And they have tried to separate out all these different factors, in particular the importance of self-confidence separately from attractiveness, separately from qualifications, which of course make you more confident, and intelligence, which has its own impact as well. And they say that attractiveness has its own separate impact even after you've discounted for all the other factors that contribute as well to success.
Yeah, because sometimes, a lot of the attractive people are also intelligent people, because a lot of times what happens is you get, a very intelligent man who's very successful is able to marry a very beautiful woman, and they could produce offspring that are both attractive and intelligent.
That's an area that there's been a lot more research effort in recently, and it does now look as if, because of processes like that, you're getting a correlation between intelligence and attractiveness, whereas in the past it's always been understood there was no connection at all, but it looks as if nowadays there is a connection.
Yeah. Anyway, so what do you think? I've heard a movement now. I don't know if you followed this, but and I don't even know how seriously it's being taken in Washington, but to try to create unattractiveness or your physical appearance as like some kind of minority group that's entitled to protection, to say, hey, there are these big differences between attractive people and unattractive people, and they want to have laws that make it illegal to discriminate in the workplace against people who are unattractive. I mean, have you heard about that?
Yes, and there is an American lawyer, Barbara Road, who has argued that any kind of discrimination in favor of attractive people should be illegal. And her particular example, the one that everybody always gives, is discrimination against people who are seriously overweight and even obese, because, of course, that's an increasingly common problem in all affluent societies. People overeat and have sedentary jobs, they don't exercise enough, and so on. So that's becoming an issue.
Yeah, well, it's a ridiculous issue. I'm going to talk about that a little bit when we get back. So stick around. This is Peter Schiff and Catherine Hakem-Packett here on SchiffRadio.com. Peter Schiff speaking with author Catherine Hackham Packett. Her book, Erotic Capital, The Power of Attraction in the Boardroom and the Bedroom. And, before the break, we were talking about this whole idea that employers should be subject to fines or litigation if they deny somebody a job because they weren't attractive enough. And, I think of all the ways we punish employers by making them subject to frivolous lawsuits is one of the reasons that so many jobs are disappearing, because employers simply don't want to run the risk of being sued because the government doesn't like the way they hire people. But, Catherine, how would you even, go about proving this? I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. How would somebody prove that they didn't get the job because they weren't attractive enough?
Well, it would be very difficult indeed, because the laboratory studies that are being carried out show that when people are asked to judge other people in a work situation or in a discussion situation or something else, they consistently say that they completely disregard looks and appearance. And yet the laboratory studies show that in practice you can see very clearly in the results of the studies that those participants who were more attractive were scoring higher, and those participants who were unattractive were scoring lower. So it has an impact, but it's totally subconscious and unconscious, and nobody is doing it intentionally.
And it isn't applied across the board. I mean, look at Chris Christie. I mean, the guy's he's a mess physically, and yet not only did he win the governor of New Jersey, but I mean, people are trying to get him to run for president. And so, the guy's enormous. I mean, normally a lot of times people would take a look at overweight people, and they might just assume that, well, they're lazy and they're going to be more sickly. They might perceive a real risk. But certainly, if somebody is obese and they show up, for a job as a swimsuit model, I mean, obviously they can't get that job.
Well, that's the interesting thing. Attractiveness apparently does affect politics, but it's usually in the case where someone is such a complete newcomer to politics that they have absolutely no political record. Nobody knows really what their policies or views or positions are. And in that kind of situation, for a complete newcomer, especially in local elections where that happens very often, then being attractive has a huge impact on election results, and it will increase the number of votes and increase the chances of being elected. But
I think that's a big thing that Mitt Romney's got going for him, is that he looks the part. He looks very presidential. But this whole idea about why are looks so different when people say, oh, it's not fair that good-looking people, can get this. Well, I mean, what about people who are born artistic, that have certain talents, that are athletic? I mean, why should beauty, why should that not be something that if people are fortunate enough to have it, that they would benefit from it just the way people benefit from other talents that they might be born with?
I agree absolutely with you. After all, people forget that intelligence is highly rewarded in our society, and yet 50% of intelligence, we now know from studies of genetics, 50% is inherited. And so you could say that intelligence shouldn't be rewarded because it's not down to effort or personal effort that people are being rewarded in their careers.
Maybe people should be able to sue their bosses because they turned them down for the job because they just weren't smart enough.
Well, there have even been arguments along those lines, and you could argue that in relation to disability, something of the same thing is happening, that people who are disabled argue that they shouldn't be discriminated against just because they're less able to do certain things, even though they could also do other things. So the arguments around what's fair and unfair will, I think, never be completely resolved.
Yeah, but the biggest problem, though, is when you put these rules into the workplace and you come up with all sorts of ways that employers can be sued if somebody could try to allege that there was some discrimination in the hiring process. They don't want to hire. But the bottom line is, every employer discriminates. That's what you do when you look for an employee. You're discriminating against everybody that you don't hire. You're trying to find the best person for the job. We do that in our personal lives. When you're looking for a girlfriend or boyfriend, someone to marry, you're discriminating. Men and women discriminate all the time. They have preferences, and they're looking for somebody that is closest to their ideal.
You're absolutely right. In a sense, discrimination is a sign of intelligence. Anyone who is intelligent is going to favor a restaurant that they consider to be superior and go there and not go to a restaurant they think inferior. And we accept that in in that context, but for some reason we think we should treat absolutely everybody the same, even though we know for a fact that they are different in all sorts of ways. So there's a constant problem there. But the key point about my book is that I'm saying in the past it was less important than today, but in a labor market where a lot of jobs are white-collar and managerial and service sector-oriented, even in professional and management jobs, social skills, social interaction skills, and also the ability to present yourself well, to be charming, charismatic, look attractive, these things matter much more. So in the kind of modern economy that we've got now, being attractive has become an important personal asset which is worth rewarding, because it's not just purely superficial. People cooperate better with attractive colleagues. They're more likely to be persuaded by their arguments. Being attractive delivers concrete social benefits and economic benefits.
Yeah, in your book, The Power of Attraction in the Boardroom and the Bedroom, did your research look into the fact, is being attractive in the boardroom, is that a negative for the bedroom, or are more men intimidated by women who are, powerful in business, or do they like it?
Well, that's interesting. We have already known that women who are very highly educated have lower marriage rates than men who are very highly educated, and they clearly have more difficulty finding partners, if you like. But that's partly because women who are very highly educated seem to have this insistence on a partner who is either equally or better educated. So, of course, that reduces their potential range of people. But the other interesting thing about companies is, and this was a study that was just done quite recently as a result of my book, people looked at the CEOs of the top 10 financial companies in Switzerland, and the CEOs were all rated on how attractive they were, and it turned out that 4/5 of them, the great majority, were well above average in attractiveness, whereas if you look at the population as a whole, around half to 2/3 are only average looking. So it does appear that your chances of success in life are very much increased, even in especially in the private sector, if you're attractive, and that applies to men as much as women.
Well, I think attractive and capable in intelligence, because there are probably plenty of attractive people that don't get anywhere near those boardrooms. So you have to have a combination of all of those things in order to achieve that kind of success, which only makes sense. But anyway, hey, thanks for being on the show. You're a great guest, and good luck with your book. Everybody else, stick around. We got another full hour coming up at the Peter Schiff Show here on SchiffRadio.com.
Your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
And this is Peter Schiff at the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com. The second hour is underway. The stock market in the U.S. still enjoying triple-digit gains, with the Dow Jones up about 150 points, although not all stocks are having a good day. Just for informational purposes only, I am not recommending any of these stocks that I'm talking about, but they're just in the news. I mean, look at Netflix, continues to plunge down to new 52-week lows, down another 8.5%. The stock is now down to 116. 2 months ago, Netflix was at $300 a share. The stock has almost lost 2/3 of its value. And my point is, look how quickly fads can fade in the stock market. People chasing momentum, when the momentum turns, look out below. These stocks can fall very precipitously. Who knows where the bottom is going to be in the stock, but it's probably very painful for people who bought the stock at high levels and who are having to ride this out. But talk about pain, the stock market. Another stock that's in the news today, and I just want to talk about it just to show a point on investing, not to make a recommendation one way or another, is Advanced Micro Devices, which came out with bad earnings. It's down almost 12% today. The stock's at $5.42. But, if you go back to January of 2002, this stock traded over $20. $20 9 years ago. This stock's $5 and change. It's down, 70% or more in 9 years. So what have AMD shareholders, how have they benefited? The stock doesn't pay a dividend. The dividend yield is 0. So if you own this stock for the last 9 years, you haven't collected a penny in dividends. Obviously, it's been a complete disaster, But if you look at where the stock was in, let me take a look at this chart, 2006, the stock got above $40. Now, somebody who bought it in 2002 at $20, right, in 2006, they had doubled their money in 4 years, right? So they probably thought, hey, I'm doing great. But did they really make any money? And remember, they didn't collect any dividends. Now, had they sold the stock, yeah, they would have made money. But if they still own the stock, I mean, what good is it? I mean, maybe they can dig up their old brokerage statement from 2006 and take a look at how much the stock used to be worth. But what good is your 2006 brokerage statement in 2011 when the stock that you still own is in the fives and you haven't collected any dividends? But it shows the difference between short and long-term investing. The guy that didn't buy that stock in 2002 when it was $20 because he thought it was too speculative, it didn't pay a dividend, the PE was too high, there was too much competition, he looked like he was wrong in January of 2006 when the stock that he didn't buy doubled. The person who looked so smart was the guy who bought it at 20, and when it was at 40, he doubled his money. Well, how does he look now? You know, now a lot of people might say, well, you know, what if he sold it? Yeah, but he probably didn't. In fact, I'm willing to bet that more people who bought AMD in 2002 at around 20, when it was around 40 in 2006, they probably bought more. They probably were so happy with themselves that they bought a stock that doubled. They were probably so caught up in the mania, the euphoria of a rising market and a rising stock, they probably bought more at the higher price. You know, there are some people that sold, but they're going to be in the minority. So again, it's all about long term. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be perfect. The guy that decided not to buy it in 2002, maybe he wasn't perfect, right? Because he could have bought it and then sold it. But he was a lot smarter than the guy who bought it and didn't sell it and who still owns it. So when it comes to the stock market and long-term investing, you got to think long-term. You got to understand the fundamentals. You got to look for value. You got to look for things like dividends. But it is hard to make money. You know, even if you bought Intel, which was their big rival back in 2002, Intel was in the mid-30s. Intel was in the low 20s. So even the guy that bought Intel lost money, but at least Intel pays a dividend. The yield there is, at this price, is close to 4%. Again, I'm not recommending Intel, just talking about how the market works. Now, another market, the gold market, somebody who has no idea how the gold market works is a correspondent in Canada. And I've got some sound, and I will get to the phones as soon as I'm done, including a caller from Shanghai who's been on hold for a while. But I want to play this clip. This is from Canadian TV, and listen to what Bridget Brown, listen to her explanation about why the price of gold has fallen. It's cut number 3.
Bridget joins us now. Bridget, overall, how did today compare to yesterday?
The biggest surprise of today was definitely gold. It was down about $100 an ounce. That represents the biggest two-day drop in 28 years. There's a couple of things going on today. Some investors were selling off their gold holdings to try to make up for losses in other areas. But Todd Hirsch says there's something else happening here too. Some investors aren't confident that with what gold is backed by, or if it's backed by anything at all, as compared to something like the U.S. dollar. Investors are comfortable that the U.S. dollar is backed by the American government. So no matter what is happening to the American economy, something like the U.S. dollar is backed by the Federal Reserve. That's going to be around a year from now. That's a much more comfortable investment for them. Tara?
Okay. Thank you, Bridget.
Well, I guess I have to take back my criticism. Apparently, this is not what she's saying. She's quoting this guy, Todd Hirsch. I have no idea who this guy is, but this guy is clueless about the price of gold. Listen to what he is saying and what she is parroting, that investors are worried about gold because it's not backed by anything. Well, it doesn't have to be backed by something. That's the point. Gold has intrinsic value. That's why it doesn't need backing. Gold is the backing. Gold is the backing for currency. The problem is the dollar, which has no intrinsic value, is backed by nothing. Being backed by the Federal Reserve doesn't count. I mean, what's the Federal Reserve? All it can do is print dollars. So, I mean, that is the problem with fiat money, is that by definition, it is backed by nothing. It's supposed to be backed by gold. Gold has real properties. It has intrinsic value all by itself, which is why it doesn't need to be backed. It's unfortunate that some of these reporters really don't know very much about money, because if she knew something about it, she'd have known enough to know that this Todd Hirsch guy is full of it. But anyway, let me go to the phones. Calling from Shanghai is JC. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
My question, good. Thanks for taking my call. My question is just if somebody like Ron Paul or Gary Johnson, somebody we could count on to be really responsible with the monetary system, if they got nominated or even elected, do you think you would change your investment strategy right away, or do you think so much of the inflation and everything is baked into the cake, so to speak, that you would still stick with the strategy, the gold, the precious metals, the inflation hedge for the time and wait?
I doubted that I would change it, on a dime, because I do think that ultimately we're going to have a shakeout, even with Ron Paul. In fact, we need the shakeout. The recession is the bitter-tasting medicine that we're going to have to swallow. The difference is with Ron Paul, we might actually swallow it. So I'm sure that if Ron Paul became elected president and he was effective in being able to move the legislation in his direction, I'm confident that sometime during his administration, I would be able to change my investment strategy. And that nothing would make me happier than to make that switch. But I do believe that even with a Ron Paul and the White House, you're still going to unfortunately see a lower dollar. You're going to see a higher gold price, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But at least it'll get better. With the other candidates, it'll just keep getting worse, and it'll never get better. And I believe the price of gold will not rise nearly as high with Ron Paul in office as it would with Obama. But if we went back on a gold standard sooner, then that might bring the price of gold higher in quicker. But I think ultimately, if we did go back on a gold standard, that the price of gold would not be as high as it's going to be if we don't go back on the gold standard and we let the currency collapse.
Yeah, I do. I mean, obviously, I'm rooting for Ron Paul or Gary Johnson. I'm a little worried, though. I wonder what you think about this strategically. It almost seems like it would be better if some sort of collapse would occur before the election than after, because I'm concerned that Ron Paul might get blamed, or whoever the Republican is. It might be even worse if we had, say, a Mitt Romney.
Well, that's always the case. I mean, that's why I was kind of rooting in a way for Obama over McCain, because I was so afraid that McCain would take the blame and we'd get somebody worse than Obama in 2012, because I knew that the economy was going to get worse during the administration of whoever succeeded Bush. And so I thought it would be healthier if it was Obama. But, of course, the guy, I mean, he's done a lot of pretty bad things. So it's kind of, I didn't vote for Obama, but and you can make the same argument now that, whoever's on the job when it hits the fan is going to get the blame. So, but at some point we got to get the right guy in there. Anyway, hey, thanks for your call. We will be back. We got a lot more coming up on the Peter Schiff Show here on SchiffRadio.com. And this is Peter Schiff on the Peter Schiff Show here at SchiffRadio.com. We'll go right back to the phones and talk to Jack, who's calling from the Bronx. Jack, welcome to the show.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Very well. I met you the other night at Webster Hall.
Yeah, it was a pretty good event. I think they had close to 2,000 people there. We did get some media reports too, although I don't know if it made any of the television coverage, but I did see some articles in print about it.
Yeah, I wanted to make a point on what you said before with Herman Cain rising the polls. I think the polls are really flawed. I mean, they're really subjective because you can get a poll to prove anything if you go to the right demographic or socioeconomic place, and how the poll is conducted, it can totally sway.
Yeah, although I doubt that Fox News was trying to slant the poll in favor of Herman Cain. I don't know that the poll was flawed. I think it is what it is.
But sometimes Bill O'Reilly even uses these polls, like the Fox News polls, where they'll be like, Ron Paul has 1%, and then at the bottom they'll be out of 50 or 100 likely Republican voters.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think that Fox News, I think they rigged their focus groups. I think that they, when they pick the people for these focus groups, when they get the immediate reaction, I think their Fox News probably screens away, obvious Ron Paul supporters, and so they don't make it into the focus group. So my advice to Ron Paul supporters, if you're ever trying to get part of a Fox focus group, pretend you're for Mitt Romney or Rick Perry, and you probably have a better shot at getting in. Then you can kind of, be a surprise when they start asking you the questions.
What do you think of the party expanding? I mean, I don't think the polls are really showing the expansion of the Republican Party through Ron Paul supporters.
Yeah, well, he definitely is. I've seen articles that he definitely is bringing in some libertarians, certainly. He's bringing in some moderates, independents, even some Democrats who are attracted to his message. I'm sure a lot of the people in the military who are supporting Ron Paul would probably support Obama if it weren't for the Ron Paul alternative. And I think, they really appreciate that message. I mean, he wants to bring those troops home now, and the troops want to come home. I don't think they like it in Afghanistan or in Iraq. I think they'd rather be home with their families. So I think that's a powerful message when there's somebody that you actually believe is going to bring the troops home. And so yeah, he is certainly expanding the party.
Yeah, and
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think John Huntsman made a really valid point where he said that the Republican Party is in fear of becoming anti-science, and I wanted to get your take on that.
Well, I don't know that it's. I mean, I think there is a religious base in the Republican Party that doesn't believe in evolution, and I think that's the only way they're veering from so-called science. And you know what? I don't think it matters whether our president believes in evolution or not. I mean, it's not going to affect their policies, but I know there are a lot of people that feel deeply about it. But as far as maybe when they're talking about, if they're trying to say they don't believe in science because they question global warming, see, there I think the science is actually in favor of the people who don't believe it. I think the people that are trying to say that we're causing global warming and all this, I think those are the people that maybe don't believe in science. So some of it is I think misplaced. And I only think maybe it applies to this creationism versus evolution. And you know what? It really doesn't matter. I don't care what the president believes when it comes to that. It's I don't see how it's even going to be relevant to what they do as the commander-in-chief. But, one thing about the poll, I was just thinking about this on the Herman Cain, on the racial element, as far as maybe why are so many people voting for Herman Cain and not Obama. And I think that maybe in some of these polls, I think people don't want to be perceived as being a racist, even though they're not. And I think if somebody is answering a poll, there might be a perception that, well, if I don't pick Obama, if I say I'm for Mitt Romney, people might assume it's just because he's black, and so I don't want to appear to be racist, and so I'm gonna show that I'm not racist by showing that I want Obama. But when you put Cain into the mix, if somebody has that mindset and they're trying to create the appearance that they're open-minded and not racist, clearly when you have Cain as an alternative, you can vote for Cain, where and you're showing that you're picking a black person, and again, so you're showing that, hey, I'm open-minded, I'm not racist at all. Look, so it gives the person who is trying to appear or overcome for whatever something, you have that out. But as I said, I think that is a very interesting wild card in the race that I think is going to work toward in McCain's favor. I mean, not McCain, excuse me, in Cain's favor. But hey, anyway, thank you for the call. And while I'm on the subject of Herman Cain, I want to play some more sound from this is Keith Olbermann's show. I think he's MSNBC, I forget. But Janine Garofalo, who I've gotten sound from her before, she's a great source of ridiculous racist quotes. But here again, she is trying to explain Herman Cain's candidacy as some kind of secret Republican ploy to try to pretend that they're not racist, to disguise their racism behind a token black candidate. Anyway, here she is, cut number 7.
Herman Cain is probably well liked by some of the Republicans because it hides the racist elements of the Republican Party, conservative movement, and Tea Party movement, one and the same. People like Karl Rove like to keep the racism very covert. And so Herman Cain provides this great opportunity so that you can say, look, this is not a racist, anti-immigrant, anti-female,
we have Herb over here.
Anti-gay movement. Look, we have a black man.
We got Harry over here.
Yeah, so So in other words, the Republicans are a bunch of racists, and they just don't like black people, but they like Herman Cain because by liking Herman Cain, then they can pretend to like black people because they'll say, hey, look, we got Herman Cain here, so we're not racist. So that's the same thing when they have a female. Is that the same thing with Michelle Bachmann, that they're sexist? But they just have Michelle Bachmann up on the stage as a token woman so they can say, look, we're not sexist. See, look, we got a woman up here on the stage. This whole thing is a gigantic show. I mean, does Herman Cain realize he's just a puppet? I mean, of course, maybe Janine Garofalo figures, well, of course, because he's just a black man. He can't possibly be smart enough to realize that he's just being used as a puppet in this show, and so is Michelle Bachmann. She's just a woman, right? She's just a puppet, so the Republicans can hide their sexist, racist, homophobia, whatever they've got. This Janine Garofalo is really ridiculous. Anyway, hey, don't go away. We got a lot more going on the Peter Schiff Show. We've got a full half hour left, so stick around. We will be right back. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. I just keep thinking about Janine Garofalo and her her belief that this is just a gigantic show scripted here by the Republicans to hide their racism with Herman Cain. And why don't they have an overt homosexual candidate so they can pretend that they are like homosexuals? I mean, where's their disabled candidate? I mean, maybe that's why they want Chris Christie. Maybe it's all a ploy so the Republicans can pretend they like fat people. Right? They want to show they got this big tent, so they want to put Chris Christie in there, as part of this show. Where's the Jewish candidate? Don't they want to pretend they like Jews? Why don't they have a token Jew up there too? I mean, this whole thing is so ridiculous. The prism with which Janine Garofalo, I'm not even how to pronounce her name, how she views everything. We got to try to get her on the show. I know we tried to get Michael Moore. We reached out to Michael Moore. He refused to come on. I played some of his sound, and I actually wanted to sympathize with him a little bit because he's saying he doesn't like capitalism, but what he really doesn't like is fascism. Maybe he just doesn't want to admit that, because I guess Michael Moore is a better capitalist than we want to give him credit for, because he understands his market. His market is people who don't like capitalism, and so he wants to be there to satisfy that demand with his films. And so if he actually had to admit that it wasn't capitalism that he didn't like, but fascism, corporatism, statism, crony capitalism, that he really wants to return to capitalism, that it might jeopardize his standing with his customers. And, as a good capitalist, he wants to make as much money as possible. He's as greedy as everybody else, and he knows that he makes the most money possible by being an anti-capitalist, because that's what sells his movies. And so he doesn't want to come on the Peter Schiff Show. I don't know, maybe Janine Garofalo will come on the Peter Schiff Show. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I would certainly welcome the opportunity to have her as a guest. Anyway, I'll go back to the telephones. On hold is Dale calling from Colorado. Dale, welcome to the show.
Hi, Peter. It's great to talk to you. A real honor. And I'll tell you why.
Thanks.
I was born in Berkeley, California, your alma mater, and I was brought up all the way up communist, basically. My uncle was SDS, and I was brought up way up out on the left. And
well, because you were living in the People's Republic of Berkeley, so.
Yeah. Well, not for long. And then it was on to Ann Arbor, and then on to Paris, all kinds, every place, a leftist, So anyway, you were instrumental in waking me up. And I just am so grateful for that. And, Henry Hazlitt and Walter Williams also. But I'm calling because of the Herman Cain issue, and Janine Garofalo was a great lead into that, because I think it's another example of unintended consequences. They started this big propaganda campaign to paint us all as racists. And I think it's just backfiring on them. So... and as far as the Fox polls goes, yeah, they're pushing Romney and Perry. They're definitely not pushing Cain. So that's
yeah. And the thing about Herman Cain, and again, when people say, "Why do you like Herman Cain?" Right? I said, he is not my favorite because I like Ron Paul, and I also like Gary Johnson. But my third choice would be Herman Cain. if I had a number of all the people in the field. And the thing is, he's not a politician. I mean, the guy's a businessman, and I think he's a straight shooter. I think he speaks from the heart, and I think he's willing to listen to guys like Ron Paul. I think he's a good guy, right? I don't think and that's what we need. We need good people in office who care about the country and who have a businessman's perspective on economics, who understand, who have lived and worked in the economy and had to deal. Herman Cain has had to deal with regulations. He's been on the same side as me. You know, I got a call the other day from the CEO of another small brokerage firm, much bigger than mine. I guess he had about 500 reps. So he's small, but, you know, he's bigger than me. But just, you know, really, really just patted me on the back for having the guts to come out and speak up against the regulations. He's going through his horror stories and how difficult it is. I want somebody in the White House who understands that, who's felt that pain, who knows what it's like to be in business and to have to deal with the crap coming down from Washington. Herman Cain has walked in those shoes. He's succeeded in those shoes. And that's the kind of guy that we need in there. Is he as good, in my opinion, as Ron Paul? No, on the ideology, but he's got better, you know, Ron Paul was a physician, but this guy is running businesses. I think he would be a much better president than any of the presidents that we've had, you know, in recent memory. You know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's pulling the wool over my eyes and he's going to get in there and disappoint me. But hey, you know, at least he's trying to pull the wool over my eyes. The other candidates, you know, I don't think are. I think there's a lot of other slick politicians up there that are just trying to get elected president, and, you know, and they're not going to be any different than anybody else.
Well, the thing that holds me back is Cain was in the Federal Reserve System, and in terms of economic philosophy...
Yeah, well, so what?
I think Ron Paul
so what? It's not...
more of an F.A. Hayek, which would be, you know, the ultimate. That would be our first choice, of course. And I think Cain is probably more a Milton Friedman type of guy. But both are well...
Yeah, well, let's put it this way. Let's say Herman Cain actually won the Republican nomination. Would you vote for him?
Yes.
Yeah, and would you rather see Herman Cain get that nomination than Rick Perry or Mitt Romney or Newt Gingrich?
Absolutely. Exactly the way.
Yeah, or Huntsman or Santorum or Michelle Bachmann?
Good.
Yeah, that's my point. I'm saying we've got a horse in this race. Maybe he's not perfect. No one's going to be ideal. You know, I had that when I ran for Senate. There were people that said, "Oh, I can't support you because you're pro-choice." I mean, okay, so you like me on all the other issues, but there's one issue, and now you can't vote for me. Or I like all your economic issues, but, you know, I don't like, so people didn't like because I said, look, I don't like your stance on Iran because I don't think that, you know, that you want to stop Iran from having a nuclear weapon. Nobody is going to agree with you 100% except yourself. It's hard to find somebody that you're going to agree with on everything. But, you know, if you got somebody that gives you most of what you want and it's a lot closer than anybody else, you know, we've got to get real people in office. And think of the message. I mean, do you think they want Herman Cain to be president? I mean, he's right about one thing. That place, that was like one of the reasons I wanted to be president, is I didn't think anybody in Washington wanted me there. Believe me, I don't think anybody wants Herman Cain to be president, which is reason enough to vote for him, just to piss off everybody in Washington.
Yep. Well, okay, right. Peter, thank you again for teaching me economics. I started with absolutely zero knowledge. Actually, I watched you on Beck when he was on CNN. I was like, who is this guy? And you've been teaching me ever since. I'm not there. I'm not fluent, but I'm just so thankful, so grateful you're out there. So if you're wondering if you're reaching us out there, especially even us former communists, you are reaching us.
Yeah, thanks. And, you know, the people, too, when you have, like, I played yesterday the sound where I keep forgetting the actor from Shawshank Redemption. Why am I always blanking on actors' names? But Morgan Freeman, when he's trying to say that the Democrats want to get rid of him, the Tea Party wants to get rid of Obama because he's a black man, and we got to get rid of this black man. You know, we're not trying to get rid of the black man. We're trying to get rid of the wrong man. You know, and the fact that a lot of people like myself would say, hey, let's get Herman Cain in there. Well, he's a black man too. You know, and again, I don't like Herman Cain because he's black. I like him because I think he's a good guy. I think he's a lot better than a lot of the white people who are also in the race. And, but I also do think, though, that his being black is going to be an advantage. I think that's not why I like him, but I do think it's going to be an advantage because I don't see how the Democrats are going to be able to turn this into a referendum on race as to try to say, hey, we're a racist nation because we want to get rid of Obama, because I know that's how they're going to spin it. They're going to try to say the reason that we don't want to reelect Obama is because he's black. Well, they can't do that. We take that issue away with a black candidate. Now, of course, hey, maybe they'll try to make him out as an Uncle Tom. They do that all the time. But that's going to be a bigger stretch. Anyway, well, thanks for the call. Next on hold is Sherry calling from Scottsdale, Arizona. Sherry, welcome to the show.
Hi, and I was actually calling initially to talk about the woman and the attractive issues, but then of course you get enthralled in everything else. And I think your point earlier about Herman Cain being the only one to drop the percentage of who would vote for Obama is not just because he's black, but more specifically because he's not a politician. I think his business background is what people are drawn to him.
Well, but you can say the same thing about Mitt Romney. Although maybe you're right here, Mitt Romney, his business background is Wall Street, and so that might be perceived as a negative, which is what I said yesterday. I would rather have a guy whose business is pizza, restaurants, because I think more people could, there's not a lot of hatred for restaurateurs, right, for that kind of small business, but the way you have for, a M&A guy, a Wall Street guy,
Right, but Mitt's run for president before he's been governor, so I think he is tied in the mindset that he's a politician. I mean, he is a businessman too, but people see him as a politician.
Yeah, you may be right. I mean, race may have nothing to do with it. I mean, I'm trying to, you figure out, but whatever the reason is, it's a significant. I mean, I don't think how you can look at those numbers and see that nobody does a better job of diminishing his support than Cain. Although I do believe that if more people really understood Ron Paul, I do think that Ron Paul would be able to peel off a lot of the president's supporters on some of the national defense issues who might be upset at how hawkish potentially President Obama has been, because he campaigned on getting a lot of the troops out of these wars, and it hasn't happened. And so that portion of Obama's support may be attracted to Ron Paul, which is another way he might be able to eat into the president's base.
Most definitely, I'm a big emailer of conservative points, and one of my friends who been a Democrat forever confided in me recently. She goes, "You know who I'm thinking of voting for?" And I guess no, Sarah, no, Ron Paul. So there's one Democrat pulled over. I'm sure she's not alone on that.
Yeah, and I think the voters want somebody who is not to blame. I mean, Gingrich, yeah, he was in Congress. I mean, these other guys, they're part of it. Herman Cain doesn't have his fingerprints on this mess at all. The good thing about Ron Paul is even though Ron Paul was in Congress, he voted against everything. He was trying to correct the problem from the inside. And so he's the one career politician that can say, hey, don't blame me. I warned you. I tried to stop it. So he's got that going for him, and Herman Cain's got, hey, I wasn't even there, So, and I think those are some very appealing characteristics, especially given how bad the economy is going to be when this election rolls around. Hey, anyway, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. We got more of the Peter Schiff Show, so stick around. This is Peter Schiff here at SchiffRadio.com. The last segment is here. I want to do a couple of sound clips before I go back to the phones. Interesting, this is more class warfare, tax the rich, this time from Richard Trumka, president of AFL-CIO, who was on Fox News last night. Listen to this exchange and hear what Trumka has to say about taxing the rich. It's cut number 9.
Here was President Obama in 2009 and what he was saying about raising taxes.
The last thing you want to do is to raise taxes in the middle of a recession because that would just take more demand out of the economy and put businesses in a further hole.
So what do you think has changed now?
I think he's finally come to his senses about that. That look, the rich have been getting away with a lot for a long time. They haven't been paying their fair share. If we're ever going to get out of this hole, if we're ever going to reduce the deficits and create jobs, they have to pay their fair share, and now's the time for them to do that.
What about the fact that they're the ones that are creating all the jobs, right? What is he saying? So the rich have been getting away with it. Getting away with what? Getting away with creating all the jobs? Because not only do the rich pay their own taxes, but they make it possible for their employees to pay taxes. After all, if the rich didn't have employees, how would the employees pay taxes? They wouldn't. The rich are doing more than their fair share. They're doing their fair share by working. You know, a lot of the small business owners work much harder than their employees. You know, if you look at the typical small business, who is working the most? Who is putting in the most hours? It's the owner of the business who's striving to make it succeed. Who's the one that's risking his capital? Not the employee. He gets a paycheck. He gets paid whether the business makes money or not. The entrepreneur puts his money at risk. He might get nothing. If there's no money left over after paying expenses, after paying salaries, after paying taxes, after paying for all the regulations, the business owner gets nothing. They are working their butts off to create those jobs and to enable the government to provide all these programs, I'm sure, that Trump supports. Anyway, here's a follow-up when the host actually tries to interject some of the facts about how much taxes the rich are already paying. Here, cut number 10.
Well, the IRS says that 1% of households pay 38% of federal income taxes. The top 10% of households pay 70% of federal income taxes. And then you have the estimate that 47% roughly of households pay zero federal income taxes. So is that not paying the fair share?
Well, I think they're paying a less share than they have been in the past. There's more of the loopholes that have been built into this thing. You have corporations that are paying less. You have rich people that are paying less. Look, they're paying less now than they did when Bill Clinton was creating hundreds of thousands of jobs every month.
You know, Trump is right about one thing. The rich are not paying their fair share. They're paying more than their fair share. It's the 47% that are paying no income taxes who are not paying their fair share. Why isn't he rallying against them? Now, I understand they're paying payroll taxes, so I agree. Everybody needs to pay less taxes. But the one thing is clear. The job creators are overtaxed. Now, are there some financiers who are running hedge funds who are getting sweetheart deal? Yes, of course. That's not the problem. That's not where most of the people are earning their money in this country. They're earning it on Main Street, in Main Street jobs, and they are paying more than their fair share. But more importantly, they are doing more than their fair share by creating the jobs in the first place, by creating the businesses, by providing the services, by producing the goods that everybody else takes for granted. Another place where he's got it wrong is talking about all the jobs that Bill Clinton was creating. Bill Clinton did not create those jobs. The jobs, I think, of the 1990s, a lot of those phony jobs that went away in the following decade were created by the stock market bubble and the real estate bubble. The real estate bubble started forming in 1996. So we got a lot of bubble-related jobs in that phony prosperity of the 1990s. Don't give Bill Clinton credit for it. Give Alan Greenspan credit, but I don't want to really give him credit. It's blame, because the phony prosperity of the 1990s and the even phonier prosperity of the 2000s is the reason that we have this painful depression right now, and unfortunately, it's just getting started. Anyway, I'll try to go back to the phones. Tom in Long Island, welcome to the show.
How you doing, Peter?
Good.
Peter, yeah, I was just curious. I don't know if you talked about it or not. I was curious about what you thought about the Wall Street protests and.
Yeah, look, I've got sympathy with the protesters, because look at the situation look at the bailouts. I mean, this is giving capitalism a bad name. You know, Michael Moore is able to vilify capitalism because of all these Wall Street bailouts. But that's not capitalism. If we had capitalism, there would have been no bailouts and these firms would have failed. So yeah, you know, I have sympathy with some of the people who are protesting what is going on, because Wall Street firms got bailed out and Main Street, got the bill.
Right, yeah, but like you said, I mean, I see, some of the pictures on TV and so forth, and, they are attacking capitalism, and, they're pushing socialism, and it just kind of, and then I see the people that are involved, and they kind of.
I know, but the bailouts are not capitalism. That's the point. You know, that's the point Michael Moore doesn't get, or maybe he gets it, but he's too good a capitalist to admit it. Anyway, hey, thanks for calling up. I'll try to squeeze in Jacob from Long Island. Jacob, make it quick.
Hey, how are you? Anyway, I agree with you. I think it's ludicrous to think that people are going to vote for Herman Cain just because he's black. I think that there's a lot more behind it just by the color of his skin. But I think that what a lot of people are forgetting, it's a shame to think of it like this, but smart money like you and I, we'll be voting for the Ron Pauls and the Gary Johnsons, but I think that dumb money and, most of the population is still going to stick with Obama in the next election.
Yeah, and Gary Johnson's got a great business background, too. I mean, yes, he was governor of New Mexico for 2 terms, but that's basically his only foray into politics. So behind that, he ran a very successful business. So as far as resumes are concerned, the combination of private sector and public sector experience, I actually think on paper Gary Johnson is the best candidate, yet gets the least amount of publicity. But anyway, hey, that's another 2 hours. It's been a quick show. Hey, again, Happy New Year to everybody celebrating Rosh Hashanah. We'll be back again tomorrow with another show. Make sure to tune in. And again, call earlier. We still have a lot of calls on hold. Call in earlier and you'll get in. Anyway, this has been Peter Schiff at SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.